This is the Inner Chief podcast, episode 338.
In our cultures, you get the behavior you reward and the behavior that you tolerate and enable. And so if folks are punished for speaking up, they're going to spend inordinate amounts of time and energy hiding things from each other for fear of being punished.
G'day, this is the Inner Chief podcast, episode 338. And our guest today is Simon Shedletzky on how to foster a speak-up culture where people feel safe, trusted, and worthy. I am your host, Greg Layton, founder of Chiefmaker and the Council of Chiefs. And I believe there is a great chief in all of us. And that through listening to the stories, strategies, and techniques of great CEOs, each of you can find and leave your own legacy through your work. The Inner Chief podcast is where you will learn how to think and make moves like a CEO. For over a decade, I've helped CEOs and senior executives around the world boldly lead change, inspire their people, and leave a legacy. So every 2 weeks, I'll bring a deep diving interview with one of these CEOs or another one of a mid to large organisation so you can find your own path to greatness as an executive. In this episode, I chat to Simon Shedletzky. Shed is a leadership author and coach who helps leaders and organisations create a culture where people feel encouraged, safe, and valued in speaking up. Shed became the fourth person to join well-known leadership expert Simon Sinek's team and has had the roles of Chief of Staff and Head of Brand Experience, Training and Development. The two still collaborate together. He is also a seasoned TEDx speaker coach and author of Speak Up Culture. When leaders truly listen, people step up. In today's masterclass, Shed will share how he overcame a stutter and fear of public speaking to become a guru in Speak Up Culture. His framework and principles for helping you create a Speak Up culture and deal with all the natural pitfalls. And of course, the most important things to consider in delivering a TEDx level presentation. Chiefs, please welcome our wonderful guest, Simon Shedletzky. Righto, Chiefs, we're here with Simon Shedletzky, known as Shed, founder of Shed Inspires and author of Speak Up Culture. Shed, welcome to the Inner Chief podcast.
Thank you, Greg, so much for having me, and delight to be with you and your listeners.
Stephen, we have this great tradition at the Inner Chief. We really love to know where our guests come from. Can you tell us a bit of a story that sums up your childhood and early life?
So I was reflecting on this, and there were sort of a few directions I could go. One, I grew up with a Holocaust survivor as a grandfather, which had a huge impact on perspective and gratitude. He was very gregarious. He was very willing to talk about his experiences. So I could share more about that. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I also thought, so I grew up with a stutter. I still do have a stutter. My dad and my grandfather, who's a Holocaust survivor, also had or have a stutter. It's a hereditary thing. I married a speech pathologist. Good choice. More so for my kids and nieces and nephews than for me. But there was a moment in grade 6 where I'm from Canada. I live in Toronto. And so you learn French. I think you start learning French in grade 3, maybe earlier. And I was in grade 6 French class, and we were reading an article or something, snaking through the class, each student taking a paragraph or two, and then the teacher would go next. And I was terrified of public speaking, let alone terrified of speaking in a language that wasn't my mother tongue. And I remember as it was snaking through the class and coming closer to me, first I was praying that the clock would hit recess before it was my turn to read, but that wasn't the case. And then my next task was looking at the passage and trying to figure out which passage would be mine so that I could get ahead of any words that would trip me up. My heart was beating. I was very scared and nervous. And I came across a word that is probably the third word someone learns in French, très, which means very. You learn the phrase très bien, very good. like it's basic French 101, and I couldn't pronounce the word très because it's a harsh, hard sounding noise that I couldn't get out of my mouth. And the more I tried to force it out, the worse it became. It was like one of those finger traps that the more pressure, the harder it is. And my French teacher skipped over me and said, "What's the matter?" And the fact that I had a hard time pronouncing a word and thought I was just playing around with her lesson plan, and skipped me. And it was at that moment that I knew I needed to get help. I knew from about grade two that I had a stutter, but it didn't get so much in the way of my confidence or productivity or ability to sort of get by until that moment. For some reason, I just knew if I don't take care of this, this is going to have power over me. And I went home to my mom. I said, "Mom, this is what happened. Let's get help." And I ended up that summer going to like a stutter camp. I was the youngest person there by 1 year, and then everyone else was sort of young adult age. And I worked in community with a group of people. Quite frankly, my stutter wasn't as bad as theirs, which sort of gave me a bit of survivor guilt, if you will. But then I began to not only learn and work on my own stutter, but actually sort of share crib notes with others. And it was this marvelous sort of learning growth experience where I sort of went head on into a challenge and have turned it into a strength, quite frankly, is
Mm,
now a good chunk of what I do is speak for a living. So what do
mm.
you know?
And you teach speaking up, which is interesting. From our
Yes,
pains, sometimes, right, come our greatest victories, greatest strengths.
I agree.
Um, Talk to me a bit more about your grandfather. I'm fascinated by his openness to talk about his experience.
Yeah.
What did he share with you, and how did that shape you?
Oh my God. How much time do you have? So it'll be my next book. So I always knew I wanted to write his memoir.
Mm,
Or as soon as I graduated from university college, the very first thing I did is I spent 2 full days with him, and I turned on a tape recorder and I said, "Go." And I just said, "Start from your earliest memory and tell me your entire life." And so I have one we have from the Shoah Foundation, which Steven Spielberg took all of the proceeds from Schindler's List and
mm,
then used it to document survivor testimony. So we have about 3 hours of him and a bit of my grandmother, who had early age Alzheimer's at that time, so her memory wasn't as strong. But he was an entrepreneur. He got kicked out of school when he was 14 years old for punching back a anti-Semitic teacher. One of his life lessons is never punch first, but if someone punches you, punch back twice as hard. I haven't had the chance to to utilize that one, at least physically, but a good lesson nonetheless. And so he ended up joining the family business, which was a butcher business. And he ended up in rural Poland, forging and forming relationships with farmers that would later save his life when he was in hiding. And
wow.
so he was drafted in 37 to the Polish army, fought in 39 when Germany invaded, was in a prisoner of war camp for 2 years, escaped in 41, walked home, took him 2 months at night only to walk back to his town where he grew up. My grandmother Eva refused to give him up for dead. 2 weeks later, they were married, and he unfortunately or fortunately had an intimate relationship with what it meant to be an SS officer in the German army. And when the SS said, "Hop on these trains and go to these working camps or go to this ghetto or go to that," he went, "I'm not going." And so he ended up leading a group of seven, which became five, and had to give away their firstborn in the subsequent 4 years of hiding in the Polish countryside. Ended up being on a vessel called the Exodus 1947, a ship full of refugees that had 4,500 people on a ship that was designed for 450. And he just ended up living this crazy life. Was handed a rifle when he landed in 1948, and then declared Israel in the first Arab-Israeli war, which obviously is contentious with what's going on in the world today in
Mm,
that part of the world. But he wasn't political. He didn't have a choice. That was his only choice: either fight or get out of here.
mm,
And then in 53 came to Toronto to join his younger brother and sister, who his sister was unfortunately run over by a streetcar tragically and passed away. And
Mm.
so he inherited sort of two more kids that he helped to raise.
Wow.
And so he was so gregarious and open to speak about his story because it's a rare experience in the Holocaust where he very much, save for the 2 years he was in prison and the 2 years where he was drafted, otherwise he kind of called the shots, which is really interesting and I
Mm.
think very different and unique from some of the typical stories of surviving through the terror that was the Holocaust and World War II.
Yeah, I'm reminded of two books I read. The famous one, obviously, Viktor Frankl and Man's Search for Meaning. It was one of the earliest books I read as an adult, which has never left me. And the other one was, and I can't recall it, but it is a book about a bit like the Exodus ship, and about a whole bunch of ships that were leaving Poland right as the Germans are invading. And this ship ends up being, it's meant to be going to America, it's diverted and ends up, they spend months and months in limbo trying to find someone that would take them.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable book.
That actually could be the Exodus because that's the Exodus's story. They left from the port of Marseille, were intercepted by the British Navy once they were in British waters outside of British Mandatory Palestine.
Yep.
And then they were sent back to Marseille, then to Germany, and they refused to get off the ship to stage
Yep.
sort of protest. So it could have been that,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there were tons of those ships then. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about your career.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first ever job as a lad?
So my first ever job was working at a summer camp as a water ski and barefoot instructor, which was great. That was great fun. I mean, my first job that required me to show up to a desk was
don't worry about that.
Yeah.
No.
Water ski. That's way more cool.
Water
ski instructor. Yeah.
I think that could be the best ever first job we've ever had. Like 200 plus CEOs. I think we're talking mostly like checkouts, Maccas, mowing lawns, delivering letters, working on a farm. That's that. Ever said.
I was shredding wake. Yes.
Oh, that is awesome. And your first ever car?
My first ever car is a car that will only be known to Canadians because it's only manufactured and sold in Canada. At least it was. It's discontinued. It's an Acura CSX, which is essentially an Acura Civic. It's like a Honda Civic with Civic. 15 more horsepower.
Oh, yeah. Hotted up Honda.
Yeah. A slightly more luxurious Honda Civic.
Lovely.
Love that car.
So look, your career started out, you and I, we have established that actually we both work for the same company, Suncor in Canada, at one particular point, but I think we're not at the same time. You went through a little bit of time consulting, and eventually your career took you to working with Simon Sinek. You heard his speech, the famous, the Golden Circles speech, who, what, and how. And what I'd love to know is you end up going to work with Simon. How did that come about? And what did you learn during that time?
I've learned so much from Simon and the team that we built over a decade. I joined that team through good timing, luck, elbow grease, and networking, I think. So I came across Simon's work with Start With Why and the Golden Circle, why, how, what, in 2010-11, so quite early days. Actually, 2009. 2010. Summer of 2010, it was shared with me. And then I went to an event in Toronto called The Art of Management to go listen to Malcolm Gladwell speak. And unbeknownst to me, Simon spoke just before Malcolm. And I was already drawing circles on napkins and explaining the Golden Circle to anyone who would listen. So I felt as though I got to see like my orator in person. And Simon speaks of a more inspired, safe, and fulfilled world. And I'm still contributing to that vision of the world. I want folks to feel inspired by their path. I want people to feel safe, psychologically safe, and fulfilled. Fulfillment is my cause, where we can use our strengths toward a cause bigger than ourselves. And so, yeah, I got to join Simon in 2011. And I think the two things I've learned from him and still strive to practice, I don't get these right all the time. One is he's taught me from a mentor of his that 2/3 of an answer is better than an answer and a half. Um, that it's better to be brief than gone than to answer a question and then answer it again, which again, something I keep working on. And then the other is so much of Simon's message is all about the inside out, that you must live what you preach from the inside out of you as a person, authentically, as well as your team. I now lead a small team with my organization. We have a book that just came out called Speak Up Culture. We must live what we preach from the inside out. Otherwise, it's, a cobbler's child who has no shoes. So I would say those two things: talk less, say more, and culture must be lived from the inside out.
Yeah, I was reflecting on my own flaws when I think about that first question in particular. And there are plenty of times I'm pretty guilty of an answer and a half. That isn't interesting. But other times, I remember I learned a lot of coaching off a guy called John Grinder, who is one of the founders of NLP. He's the guy that taught Tony Robbins in the early days. I spent a lot of time with Grinder. And he had a saying that an insight made by the coach is owned by the coach. An insight made by the client is owned by the client. And that's been almost like my equivalent. As much as possible, allow the client, create the space, the time, have the patience to allow the client to come with that insight, because that is just so powerful.
Yeah. I'll just add two things at risk of breaking the very rule that I'm trying to establish here. So one is so one, to the very thing you just said around don't steal the relevation.
Yeah.
That as much as you can, let someone make their own relevation, because it'll stick more than you handing it to them.
Yep.
And of course, there are moments where you're beaten around it, or you've been at the same place with someone for so many times, and you just have to point it out to them.
Yep.
And then the other is good old George Costanza. If you're a Seinfeld fan, leave them wanting more. That when you give 2/3 of an answer, you pique interest and curiosity.
Yeah.
When you give an answer and a half, you beat a dead horse.
Yeah, that's right. George's favorite move for me of all time was when he decided to do the absolute opposite of everything he'd done previously.
Yes.
Yes. To me, is one of the best episodes.
It's the best.
Yeah. And when we get stuck in life, that's what we should watch.
Yes. When he meets George Steinbrenner, the owner of the Yankees, who says, "Pleasure to meet you. I wish I could say the same."
That's
so good. Hire this man. Yeah, so good.
Hey, so look, you actually went on to become a TEDx speaker coach, and I'm fascinated by that. And I think huge number of executives still carry this challenge of speaking in public, and I think for a very wide range of reasons. But I actually love. I'm not going to say anymore. I'm going to do that 2/3 piece. Let you answer this a bit. What is the most common challenge you work with when working with speakers who are preparing for a TED Talk?
So I think the biggest challenge, and I want to hear your answer as well. I invite your answer, Greg, your point of view as well. So one is, it's very hard to read the label on the jar when you're stuck inside of the jar.
Yeah.
And what I love about TED is TED as a community rewards ideas. They don't reward speakers. And I love it, because TED isn't searching for who's the most compelling speaker who has a new book out like most other conferences do. TED looks at whose idea has the most efficacy to move the world forward. Boom. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, what you end up getting is a lot of people who aren't necessarily practiced or talented at speaking. And so now the fun is, how can you work with and help mold someone who's really compelling but doesn't yet know it, and help them show up as their most compelling self? And the challenge is, as with anyone, is it's very hard to be subjective, almost near impossible, to be, pardon me, objective with oneself. Easy to be subjective, hard to be objective. And so part of the fun and beauty of working as a TEDx speaker coach is to help point out to someone the stuff that's really compelling in how they share their story or their content, how they speak, or the order. I often find that folks share their TED Talk in the wrong order. And it's like, hey, move this piece here, actually talk in the third person, and then go, that was me, by the way. Like, it's a lot of fun helping someone massage their own content when they don't yet realize how genius it is.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay.
Do you have a different answer to that question, by the way? Do you have a different perspective?
I think you're touching on some of the key elements that I see. Like, we have a little process in the back end of all mastery, which is called mindset, process, skill. Do you have the right? And mindset really is state, like the state control. Are you present and in flow? And can you speak with a level of just calmness and fluidity? Process being the order that you speak, the content matter of each order. And then the skill is intonation, pauses, the actual words you use. We have a little process when we do this mini MBA we run, and when I get people to share stuff, they might share their strategy or their values that they brought to life, and I'll get everyone else in the group to go, hey, look, Shed's going to share the values and the standards and the mantras and the rituals they're going to use to bring that to life. Your job is to write down anything Shed says that just leaps at you. What phrase? Anything that you think falls flat, write that down too. And then when they're finished, Shed gets to hear, because you said, hey, that bit's got to go here. Well, there's the answer, because very often people go, that's the bit that stood out to you?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even realize that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's
totally.
that. You can't see it yourself, right, from inside the jar.
Yeah.
Now, are you in need of an operating rhythm? An operating rhythm is that schedule of meetings. Actually, it's a bit more than that. It's a system, the drumbeat of your team. And what it will do if you get it right is it will create the culture, it will drive the results, it will bond the team together, it will handle risk, help you see around corners, create creativity, embed the rituals and traditions of your team. There is so much that an operating rhythm can deliver when done right. So, Chief, if you'd like to know how to do that, just get our full free resource on it. Just go to chiefmaker.com/operating rhythm, and there's a detailed PDF there with all the hows and whats and whys, some of the pitfalls, and an example schedule for you to follow. chiefmaker.com/operating rhythm, and create the drumbeat for success in your team. So let's talk about Speak Up Culture. Your new book, fantastic. Got some really, really valuable tools. And as we said at the beginning, this is coming from a real passion for you. Can we just talk initially about what's going on in the world around the quality of Speak Up culture? And in particular, has there been a trend post-COVID, you think, where maybe this is going in the wrong direction, or is it flat? Is it actually getting better? What are you seeing?
So I think a couple things. So one is, first and foremost, what do I mean by a speak up culture?
Yeah.
I'm talking about speak up culture from the lens of what makes teams and organizations operate and perform better. There's sort of a movement around speak up and speak out and challenge authority and a lot of sort of societal pushback. I'm happy to speak to that, and there's a place for that in this conversation. When I think about speak up culture, though, I define it as an environment in which members of a team feel that it is both safe, psychologically safe, and worth it to speak up. And speak up with ideas, to even if they're half-baked, to make things better, to offer feedback to one another, to those more junior, to those more senior in the organizational chart. And the purpose of feedback is in those first four letters, feed. It's not called knock down back. It's called feedback. The purpose of feedback is to help one another grow. to share concerns before they become ethical or real tangible issues to a business, to disagree. It's one of the myths of a speak up culture is that, oh, everyone gets along and agrees about everything all the time. No, that's a photopia. That's not how real relationships thrive. Real relationships thrive when we use conflict and tension to sort of propel upwards, to learn and
advance.
grow.
Yeah.
Exactly. And to even admit mistake. So, psychological safety and like I think COVID accelerated some things in the sense that a lot of folks had an experience where they evaluated their lot in life and sort of said, is this what I want? And so in some respects, I think there's been a great um, progress in what do I want out of life and career? Where do I want to live? What type of job do I want? Do I want career to be my number one goal? Do I want to work to live or live to work?
Yep.
So I think there's been, in some respects, a healthy evaluation. So yeah, I'm curious. What are your thoughts on it as well?
I wondered if what I'm seeing a little bit of is with the hybrid working, we still have a lot of that here in Oz, people working from home 2-3 days a week.
Yep.
And I just wondered if that was eroding some of the trust that is so required, because probably leads into my next question, like the role of trust. By the way, I love that little framework, because one of the most important things is being able to sort of diagnose what's going wrong. And I love how it's, is this a safety issue or is this a worthy issue?
Yeah.
Because they both pop up, right?
Yeah.
When they are sort of connected, which is why you can have them in a little matrix with these great quadrants.
Mm-hmm.
But before we might just map that little matrix out in a second, but let's talk a bit about trust and what are the keys to building that trusting environment?
Well, so trust is more than a feeling. I'm leaning into work from my dear friend Rich Diviney, who wrote the book The Attributes, and Rich would say trust is more than a feeling. Trust is a belief. And I think that trust is a belief that another party or parties have your own best interests at heart and in mind and in practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, I'll give you a great example. We have a common friend in James Whitaker. He's who introduced us. I had a chance to meet James in LA. I recorded a podcast with him. Like, my experience of that guy is he is rooting for my success. Like, I have no doubt in my experience of him, though I've had 2 or 3 phone calls with him and had a chance to spend a morning with him. Like, I haven't known him for 10 years, but I was introduced to him from a friend. So already there's a reputational, well, my good friend trusts him. I'll likely trust James. I had a great experience with him. Now James introduces me to you. Like, that's how trust can grow, through reputation. So our reputation walks in the door before we do. James introduced us. I'm going to like Greg.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't I? If James and Greg are good friends, I think I'll get along just fine, right? But trust is a belief that another party has your best interest in heart, mind, and practice, which means I'm willing to tell you the truth, even if it's hard to hear, which means hey, I don't want to do this deal for you because I don't think it's good for you long term. Let me explain why. Like, that's how trust is built, is through service orientation, is by having somebody else's needs, point of view in mind. I've heard trust broken down into 4 C's: competency, consistency, compassion, and character. And that's also work that I've done with Rich Diviney on that and learned from him. So
very much like that. I like that kind of model.
It's great.
I've heard one similar, which goes likable, capable, reliable. Are you likable? Are you capable, which means you can do it? And reliable means you do it on time, every time, to the right level. Right, because sometimes you can be capable and not turn up.
But what's nice is that's a Venn, like, meaning,
exactly.
like, you might be a bit lower on likability, but it's okay, because the other 2 are strong, as an example. So the other thing I'll just say, so on the work from home versus work hybrid. So, I mean, introduce me to someone who's very pleased to be mandated. Like
Yeah.
mandates and happiness are not typically strongly correlated.
Yeah.
And so I'm a I'm a big believer in the nature of the work should dictate where the work takes place.
Mm.
And I'm all for in-person connection, and I want it to be strategic because
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than forcing your people to commute in, have time away from seeing their kids off to
Yep.
school or take care of their dry cleaning or grocery or whatever, just to go into an office and frickin' sit on another virtual meeting. That
Yeah.
makes
Yeah.
zero sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make the time in person strategic and value add.
Yep.
And if you have to mandate back to office for the sake of the lease that you've put out on the office, you have bigger problems.
Yeah.
Solve that.
It's something else. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this matrix shared like in the book. So on the y-axis, we have this scale of sort of danger to safety. So danger
Yes.
at the bottom, leading up towards a really safe environment. And then
Mhm.
on the x-axis, it goes from this apathy to impact. So
Yes.
bottom left is danger apathy, right?
Yep.
Top
Yep.
left is safe that apathy. Therefore, bottom right is dangerous but impactful,
Yep.
and top right is safe but impactful.
Yes.
And I think I think we're probably almost all of us could almost pick an environment where, hey, that I was at that box, that was dangerous and like this apathy, like what I was going to say, it was not my point. It wasn't worthy. It wasn't
Yeah.
worth speaking up.
Yeah.
Can you maybe just talk through the model a little bit and about why it really helps?
Yeah. So this is the thesis of the book, which is boiled down into a 2x2. Kim Scott, who's become a friend and endorsed the books, shared a very important role in writing a business book that you have to include a 2x2 matrix. So I literally took a 2-hour drive in the
Yeah.
countryside and came up with it. I'm not
Yeah.
joking, and I have the sketch of what
Yeah.
I drew right here.
Lovely.
So what's interesting is if you have the book in your hand, you'll know that it's on the y-axis. I actually wrote safety to fear,
Mm.
but I realized that a couple things. One, speaking up in a speak up culture is not without fear.
Yeah.
It's actually feeling the fear, using it as data,
Yeah.
and then choosing how to pursue. And so I realized the opposite of safety isn't fear. The opposite of safety is danger, psychological danger.
Yeah.
And then on the other axis is apathy to impact. So top right quadrant, we all want to be part of a team in relationships where there's a common perception that it both feels safe and feels worth it to speak up. It isn't without absence of fear, as I said, but it feels safe enough and that it is worth it that I have an intervention, that I speak up, that I share feedback, whatever it might be, and that I'm encouraged to do so, and just as, if not more importantly, rewarded after I've taken that risk and spoken up. So we all want to be there. That's the sort of sweet spot. And the sweet spot of a speak up culture includes tact, decency, respect, emotional intelligence, situational awareness. A speak up culture is not sucking up, and a speak up culture is not hall pass to be a jerk, right?
Yeah.
There's that sort of sweet spot. We don't want to be in that lower left quadrant, which is an unhappy marriage of danger and apathy or danger and futility. It isn't safe to speak up. And even if we did, nothing would change. We'd get in trouble and it would be status quo.
Yep.
And that's where we get resignation or quiet quitting. The other two quadrants are really interesting, though, is the upper left, as you said, is high safety, but low impact.
Mm.
You and I could be best of friends. We go back 25 years since our days at Suncor, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
You realize, Greg, that I'm doing something that's getting in the way of my success. You feel safe to have that intervention with me. It's a great conversation and nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
And you wait 3 weeks and you do it again and nothing changes. Like, how many times do you return to a dry well before you look for better pasture?
That's right.
Right?
Beautiful.
So that's high safety, but low impact, which is the very reason why I've come to realize a speak up culture is both. Is it safe and is it worth it? The bottom right is It isn't safe. It's dangerous, but it's worth it. This is Boeing. The
Yeah.
folks, I believe I saw 34 confirmed whistleblowers, which is an external act whistleblowing, but 34 people have raised their hand and said, I don't feel safe saying what's wrong with this manufacturing process or facility or culture, but
Wow.
I'm willing to raise my hand and take personal risk because
Mm.
something has to change. It's worth
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So
I've seen a
that's the
lot of that
quadrant.
in like in very hierarchical kind of cultures. I've done a lot of work in mining in Africa and worked in Asia a bit. Far more hierarchical than here in Oz. And people were like the level of danger they feel, but also the futility, like they would never get listened to, um, is makes the cultural transformation difficult because it's actually almost built into their culture as well. So there's some great work in that done by it's called Culture Map by Erin Meyer. Have you seen that?
It rings a bell. I don't know it
Yeah, it's
intimately, but it
cool.
rings a
It helps
bell.
you just
Yeah.
the cross-border, cross-cultural issues that has always been in those kind of roles. I found that really fascinating.
Nice.
Um,
Yeah. But you get the in our cultures, you get the behavior you reward and
yeah,
the behavior that you tolerate and enable. And
yeah,
so if folks are punished for speaking up, they're going to spend inordinate amounts of time and energy hiding things from each other for fear
yeah.
of being punished.
I remember hearing a great business story. Actually, I think it was John Grinder who I mentioned earlier. I think he actually helped Japan Airlines. I think it was Japan. Where in the cockpit, but where the captain would never be challenged by anyone in the cockpit.
Yeah.
And the solution was that they decided that the captain could at any point trigger a false alarm. Right. And he said, if you don't catch the false alarm, you're going to be in trouble. And he would say that to the whole cockpit. Now, as they're flying along, if something went wrong, the first mate or the navigation person or whatever would go, hey, boss, hey, I found this problem. Now, sometimes it was a false alarm, sometimes it wasn't. And the boss would always be like, gotcha, no matter what. So he would be able to save
Yeah.
face. But it sort of created what it did is it went from very almost dangerous to complete safety,
Yeah.
right? Because the importance was
And
always there.
rewarded.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rewarded. Yeah, yeah. I liked how you used that word before. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So I'm thinking of a couple things. One, Japanese culture, which is the birthplace of Kaizen, which is continuous
yeah,
improvement, and the andon cord from the Toyota manufacturing process,
yep,
which is they reward folks for pulling that cord
yep,
because they see something that either there's a safety issue or we can make
yep,
an improvement.
yep.
Uh, we took Kaizen and continuous improvement, brought it over to the US and called it lean, which
Plain,
is
yeah,
why it doesn't work because you market the output and you take value away from the input in the process that sustainably gets you that output. So
yeah.
that's one thing you made me think of. The Korean Airlines example is different.
Okay,
The Korean language systematically is hierarchical. So there's great formality and authority in the Korean language. And so how that manifested in the Korean Airlines cockpit is that you would have it sounds similar to the
yeah,
Japanese example, maybe from a root cause.
sure.
And this is in many Asian cultures. You do not challenge authority.
Yeah, yeah.
Now that's fine for your father-in-law, not so good when you have 185 passengers who are depending to arrive at their final destination in one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so what they did, so at most in the Korean Airlines cockpit, they found issues where the more junior pilots saw that there was an issue, but at most they would lightly hint to the more senior pilot problem. And so they provided training and changed the language
oh,
that's used in the cockpit. They now speak English because there's less formality.
why? Oh, that's an interesting change. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that's what made me think of that.
yeah, yeah.
Malcolm Gladwell writes about that in
Oh, does
Outliers.
he? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting because there is a whole body of work. Having studied some linguistics over the years, there's a bit, actually, a huge debate around, does our culture come from the language we speak? Right? Because if you think about the German language as opposed to the English language, as opposed to different languages, have different
Parisian French, yeah.
The elocution of the French words, like it almost brings out an emotion in people, right?
Well, yeah.
Really,
I would say the language should be, I think, an artifact of the culture. I define culture as in the how we treat each other, how we behave, how work gets done in the context of an organization. And the language used, as well as the particular language in that culture, is an artifact or an output or representation of what the culture is.
Yeah, it's really yeah. There's a big debate amongst linguists and not philanthropists,
anthropologists.
Thank you. About exactly this. I mean, these professors have debates that go on forever about it. But if you want a cool book that talks about it, there's one called "Don't Sleep, There Are Snakes." It's about a guy who is a linguist and goes into the very remote, untouched tribes of Brazil and lives with them. And things like, they don't have words for left and right. They don't have words for north, south, east, west. It's everything in relation to the river. They don't have numbers. Wow. Very, very interesting. And he said this plays this interesting role in their culture. And anyway, I don't know if this is a solvable debate it's out there. Anyway.
I think the answer is yes.
Yeah. Okay. Shed, why do you think so many leaders battle with this idea of creating a speak up culture? Is it ego, fear, capability? Like, what's behind all this?
It's because it's hard. I mean, it's hard to work on our relationships. It's hard to have the courage to receive feedback. I think, the biggest thing that trips leaders up or makes them ineffective is insecurity. First and foremost, every single human being should have insecurity, but there's a difference between confidence and humility and confidence and arrogance. So arrogance is actually insecurity. It's just loud, which has given me greater empathy for when someone is arrogant. It's like, oh, it's so cute. They're just insecure. It's just loud. What's interesting is you can both be confident and humble at the same time, but you can't be humble and arrogant at the same time. Confidence is the belief that you're good. Humility is a knowing that you can always get better and that there are people who are better at things than you are.
Yeah.
And so the work of leadership, like, there's no mistake, Greg, that every single leadership development program I've ever come across all starts with a module on self-awareness, figuring out this instrument, how to play it to the best of your ability, how to harmonize best with others. And then the work of leadership is in helping others figure out what's their instrument, how do they fine-tune to play it at their best in an ever dynamic changing world, and how to harmonize and play best with others. Secure leaders are strong leaders. Insecure leaders are at risk of being toxic leaders.
Beautiful. People, go to shedinspires.com, buy Speak Up Culture, connect with Shed on LinkedIn or Instagram or X, whatever is your favorite thing. I'll put all those links in the show notes, but please check it out. It's really valuable. And I think this piece around creating that culture Speak Up Culture is so important in any high performance team. Like, it's not a high performance team unless you have that.
Totally.
Okay, Chiefs, more from Shed in a minute. Now, recently, we continued our Best of series by featuring Cliff Gale, former Managing Director of Light and Easy for over 20 years. We spoke about leading with passion, respect for your people, and keeping the soul alive in your business. Here's what Cliff had to say about staying on top of the culture in a growing business.
The soul of the business was maintained because I drove the culture of the business so passionately. If there was an issue with culture, if there was an issue with these people in the business not getting along with these people, I wanted to create the solution. I wanted to get to the core of the problem we would have issues within our call center from time to time, and I'd say, no, that's not the way a call center runs. A call center, it's got to run emotively. It's got to run fluidly.
You can listen to that brilliant conversation with Cliff by going to chiefmaker.com/337. Righto, Chief. Let's get back to Stephen Shedletzky. So, Shed, a few rapid-fire final questions.
Yeah.
If you could form the ultimate executive team, well-known leaders from any time in history, from anywhere in the world, who would your first three picks be and why?
I mean, this is what I think part of the issue of so my answer is E, none of the above. and this is why. I think we live in a culture that celebrates the individual too much. And behind every great leader is an amazing team. Sure, I could pick Satya Nadella. I like what he's doing at Microsoft, but like take Microsoft as an example. That's a company that changed so much based on who was leading it.
Yeah.
Bill Gates to Steve Ballmer to Satya. So the most impressive leadership attribute I know is humility, which is an honest and modest view of oneself. And so I would pick anyone who realizes that they're great because of the support of the people that they have around them.
Right answer.
Cop-out answer, sorry.
It's still a great answer. Okay. What has been the most valuable learning program of your career?
Oh. The most valuable learning program of my career, I took part in a 4-part leadership development program where we went to this beautiful place close to Asheville, North Carolina, and we went there for a year, 4 times, once in every of the 4 seasons, and went through a transformative leadership journey together. Awesome. It was amazing, and I grew the most from that program.
That is cool. Yeah. What is the best advice a mentor has ever given you?
I think 2/3 of an answer is better than an answer and a half.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. What is your number one interview question when looking for people to join your team?
I'll go from the first piece, which is tell me a time where you couldn't have done something if it weren't for the help of another, and get a sense if they have humility. Yeah,
that is a great question. Yeah, well done. Can you nominate another chief, founder, guru like yourself you hold with great respect you think should be on the podcast?
I will highlight my dear friend. We call each other co-mentors because it's not a mentor-mentee relationship. It used to be, but as I've grown in my career, it's become a mentor-mentor relationship. Leanne Davey, she's an org psychologist, also out of Toronto. She was my first ever boss's boss at my, not at the water ski gig. It was the one after that. Yeah. She was a leadership solutions practice. Yeah. She was a chief shredder. I love it. And she's coined a term called conflict debt. That the more we let conflict stew and don't deal with it, even if it's the little things, the more debt builds in that relationship. So Leanne Davey, brilliant work.
Yeah, that's cool. Okay. Okay, if you could lead any company in the world other than your own, what would it be?
The easy answer would be the Toronto Blue Jays, which is my favorite baseball team. That would be fun, but I don't think I would last.
That doesn't last.
Yeah.
What do you want?
Give me a season. Give me a season.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. What is a final message of wisdom and hope that is vital for this current generation of chiefs?
I would say that as a leader, especially if you're in a C-suite role, you are, as I describe, a capital L leader. You have the title, and just because you have the title doesn't give you a hall pass. You still have to behave in a way that is worthy of that title. And I would say that your whisper is a shout and your tiptoes are stomps. Everyone is listening and watching to your every move. And that the relationship we have to our direct boss has more of an impact on our health than that of our relationship to our family doctor, and it's at par with our life partner. And so whether or not you're in a line of work where there's life and death, right? The number of times I hear CEOs say, we're not doing heart surgery here, but know that if you are a formal leader, you have impact on the health and well-being of the people around you. That's why leadership is either a life-depleting or life-feeding line of work. And I want more and more leaders to feed the lives of those around them, not deplete.
Shed, that is an awesome finish, mate. Thank you so much for coming on the Inner Chief podcast. I love the work you're doing over there, and mate, we wish you all the best.
Thanks, Greg. A joy to meet you and chat with you, and hope this is valuable to your audience. Take care.
Chief, that sums it up for this week on what is a very important topic that actually has a lot of nuance to it. And I really love how Shed has gone into the detail to provide a framework to consider the pitfalls and the key things we all need to focus on to create a speak up culture. Of course, all the links and show notes can be found at chiefmaker.com/338. And if you'd like to stay in touch with Chiefmaker, just go to chiefmaker.com/subscribe. If you would like to nominate a CEO as guest of this show, drop us a line with your nominated guest on info@chiefmaker.com.au, and we'll check out and see if they are the kind of chief we want to have on our show. Now, Chief, if you're yet to rate the episode and subscribe, I hope you'll do so soon. It helps others see the magnificent value that the chiefs and gurus on the show bring to their life and career. So make sure you hit subscribe on your podcast app now, give it a 5-star rating if you think it's worthy, and leave a short review about your favourite episode. Righto, Chief, as always, remember to stay epic.